Hello, everyone, and welcome to Collision Repair Magazine's Industry Insider Radio, a podcast for shops, shop owners, techs, and every level of the collision repair industry. I'm your host, James Kerr. This episode is brought to you by ProSpot International, maker of quality welding systems and repair products for the collision repair industry. For more information on ProSpot, please visit their website at prospot.com, prospot.com, or email info@prospot.com. Today, we have a number of guests with us to do a deep dive into going from the shop floor to wherever you want to be in the collision repair industry. Each panel member started life as a tech and went on different career paths within the industry. Today is about possibilities. Just some of the possibilities that a career in collision repair affords you just from starting on the shop floor. We'll introduce the panelists in a moment, but first, let's introduce Russell Duncan from ProSpot International. Hi, Russell.
Hi, good morning, James, and the rest of the crew. Just going to give a little brief description on myself. But for today, as James said, we are going to discuss with three career body shop individuals their paths from technician and hopefully to career choice. Just wanting to really indicate, choices that are also available. I'm currently the Director of Sales and Marketing for ProSpot Canada. And just as a quick note to us, ProSpot, we're here to make a difference in our industry through continuous improvement, customer commitments, and of course, collaboration, all the while having a little fun doing this. I'm in the midst of a 40-year career. I'm not sure, where this is going to end. Hopefully never for me. Did start as a technician myself, doing aircraft refinishing and also pipeline refinishing and welding in days gone by. But at this point, I would like to introduce the panel, James, put it back to you so we can actually get started with the meat of this session.
Okay, we've got three panelists today, each of them starting from the same point, roughly speaking, but ending in very different places, which makes it very interesting. First, we've got John Martinelich from the Lift Auto Group. Hi, John.
Hello, good morning, how are you?
Can you talk a little bit about yourself and what brings you here?
Sure. I've been in the trade for about 24 years. Started off as a technician through foundation program at Vancouver Community College is how I got my start. And then became a journeyman and worked in the industry for tech about 14, 15 years. And then ended up going to teach at that college at Vancouver Community College for 3 years. And then I went and worked at a company called Wedge Clamp for 3 years as well. And then I've been with Lift Auto Group for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. 4 years. 5 years this December, I apologize. And my title now is Director of Technical Services with them.
So you've run the gambit around the industry then?
Yes, sir.
At this point. Okay, and then also as a panelist, we have Stefano Liesi from the Canadian Collision Specialist. Hello, Stefano.
Hey, how are you doing?
And can you introduce yourself briefly, please?
So I'm been in the industry for about 40 years. Started off with reading hot rod magazines, and then it just creeped into my system from there. Was a refinish. I started off in the refinish area and moved into collision, got my Red Seal designation, and I've also been a shop owner briefly with a partner many, many, many years ago. Got into the insurance side of things for a while, and education is where I've kind of landed. I do consulting and technical training and hands-on education for technicians in the industry. And this is where I'm at. And so far, so good. And I'm having a good time doing it.
We'll start it with magazines. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. And lastly, our third panelist is Oliver Teal from Relic Custom Garage. Hello, Oliver.
Hi, James. Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, thank you. So tell me about yourself and collision repair a little bit.
Well, I've been about 20 years for me in the industry. I've spent most of my career in British Columbia. I've finally ended up here on Vancouver Island, where I've kind of gone out on my own, and I'm calling myself Relic Custom Garage, and I'm focusing on restoration work and custom work. But I started off on the floor Worked for about 15 years on the floor. Progressed into being a shop foreman, and then into an estimator, into management. And then I was operations manager for a couple of shops. And yeah, that's kind of the long and the short. It's taken me all the way from the bottom to, running facilities on my own. So.
All right. So we can do this together, or we can do this separately, but I think that you guys have answered a few things already. So what drew you into the industry in the first place? With Stefano, he said it was magazines, which I love, my favorite answer perhaps. But John, how did you get started in collision repair?
To be honest, I grew up commercial fishing, and I was able to buy an old car when I was with my money back then, and I couldn't find anyone to fix it. So I figured I would go learn how to fix a car for my own stuff and do it as a hobby. And then 24 years later, I still fix them for a living.
Wow, that's great. Wow, you
plan.
started by doing it yourself, and then you took it professional. That's great. Oh goodness. And what about you, Oliver? What was the impetus that got you provoked into collision repair?
Well, I kind of grew up around cars. My father's a mechanic by trade. He'd been in the industry for 45 plus years. We restored an old Volkswagen Beetle when I was young. When I was 16, it was my first car. And that's kind of when I found my passion for fixing cars and for old cars. Like I said, always been around cars, same as Stefano, reading magazines and dreaming about hot rods. And one of my early jobs, I was working in a composites manufacturing shop, fixing molds and building molds. Was a lot of sanding, a lot of shaping, a lot of applying filler and creating these shapes. And I kind of found that I had a knack for creating shapes out of filler. I took that experience to a shop that built race cars and restored vintage race cars. And I worked at that for about 3 years or so. By that time, I was getting into my mid-20s, and I was realizing I was a bit of a starving artist. So I took the skills that I'd learned from kind of playing with old cars on my own, my composites and restoration and fabrication experience, and I walked into a collision shop and said, hey, this is my background. I need to get a red seal, and I need to get a trade behind me. And that's kind of how it started for me.
So John and Oliver, for both of you, it seems like it started with hands-on experience. It started with having a car and working on a car and falling in love with cars. And that is what pushed you into the industry. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Stefano, I chide you about magazines, and I love the magazines part, but what was the other driving factor that got you started?
It was the magazines and seeing what these cars look like and trying to emulate that. I always wanted to be, I wanted to have a car on the cover of CarCraft or Hot Rod, like a paint job that I had done. I always thought that would be like just the pinnacle of it. Sadly, it never happened. Got close, but never happened. But same thing, when I was 15, I convinced my dad that for my 15th birthday, I'd like to get a car to fix up so I could drive it when I was 16, which we did, and fixed up friends' cars, and it was all hands-on. Sadly, the education system didn't have auto body available as a student. So just as Oliver and John, I figured it out on my own. And sadly to say, the first repairs were done with pop rivets and tin from Canadian Tire. and as with Oliver, I learned how to shape filler really quick and really well, because that's the skill set we had, right? And then it just progressed from there.
I have a lot of feelings about this, because each of you started with hands-on experience. Each of you started because you had a car, you had something to work on, and you had a gateway into the industry that way. Now, Stefano, you say that you looked around and there wasn't an education to allow you to bridge that gap, and you guys had to come up with it on your own gumption, basically. Do you think you would have benefited? I think the answer sounds pretty clear, Stefano. You would have benefited from education at the time?
Absolutely. So there was education available to a level, but it was vocational education. And if you were deemed academically above that level, you weren't allowed to attend it. In other words, you couldn't go to a vocational school because you were academically too smart. I know it's hard to believe if you know me that you'd think, oh, really? But the reality is that's the way some things work in our system. And sadly, it still does. So as some people refer to it as a dumping ground or a dumb trade, or oh, well, you know what, he's not smart enough for math and English or science, so we'll stick him in auto body. Well, surprise, you need those in order to do auto body.
Well,
So
it's an
that's
attitude
wild.
that needs to change, like,
Oh,
hands down. And I'd like to think that all of us here are trying to do our best to change that, because you know as well as I do, some of the people in body shops are some of the smartest people I've met. So that doesn't reconcile. So we know how long you guys have been in the industry. You said, John, you've been in the industry for, what did you say, 40 years?
No, 24.
24. Okay, I was going to say you don't look that old. Russell, you're in the industry for 40 years, and you plan on being in it for 40 more.
40 more, yes.
Yeah, 40
that's
more.
the plan.
And Oliver, you said 24, did you say?
About 20 years now, yeah.
20, goodness. And so we have more than well over a century of experience in the room. And then Stefano, you said that you were in it for about 40 years, the industry?
Basically.
You guys all look very spry. I know that we can't see you, but there's a lot of experience here. So I'm interested in the changes. Each of you started in with a car, more or less. And the kind of cars that are coming out now, the depth of knowledge that would be required to take a new car, a car from last year, and just fix it up in your driveway would be astounding. I don't know that you could do that in the same capacity as when you guys started out. Is that the biggest change that's happened in the industry, or is there a more significant change than that? Oliver, I'll ask you first.
Well, yeah, I mean, you touched on that. Cars have certainly become a lot more complex, not only in their electronics aspect, but simply the construction. I mean, we've gone from basically mild steel cars to, progressing into more advanced steels. And now we're dealing with ultra high strength steels that really we don't do a lot of repairing. It's replacing those damaged sections. And you combine that with very complicated interiors that have to be removed to be able to facilitate these repairs. It's not like just popping out a cardboard door panel. Now you've got very elaborate trim, very delicate trim, very expensive trim that has to be removed. And then we have all our safety features now, ADAS, for example, which John and I, before the recording, were just kind of touching on that. And it's a complex world, and it's a very sophisticated world, and a very crucial world that we have to ensure that we're calibrating these cars properly. And even a simple refinish on a bumper may involve a complex calibration, something that you definitely wouldn't be able to do in your driveway, I would safely say.
So education is what we're getting back to, right?
Yeah, it always kind of circles back to training and education. And yeah.
John, what about you? What do you think is the most pronounced difference you've seen over the course of your career?
I echo Oliver. The vehicle construction, what's changed from then till now is staggering. It's really, let's call it 20 years, an 02 to a 2022. The difference in vehicle construction is staggering. And every manufacturer requests different things, right? They all want different repair procedures. And if you're not educated on their OEM repair procedures, and you're really just flying blind.
Well, let's not present an image of this being, completely inapproachable. Stefano, you have a background as an instructor. Can you talk to me about how you bridge that gap?
Well,
I know, big question. We brought out the big guns here, but it's an important one, right?
So, being a tech in the past it plays a big factor in helping me bridge that gap for the knowledge and everything that we see today. Being able to apply some old school ideologies, understanding their place and time, and then now understanding why things have changed, right? So if I can apply my skill set to what I do, I find that that's very imperative. If I can't perform what I preach, then I may as well go home. So I need to learn all of these changes, all these things that have come on. And some of the changes that I've seen in the industry from way back when, because you guys are all youngsters, was the transition from lacquer primer to putty and lacquer putty into 2K products. That's a transition that you guys may not have experienced. I don't know, John or Oliver, did you ever use lacquer primer or putty?
In the early days, we were using 2K primer, but still putting it over top of lacquer putty, and found that didn't didn't work very well. But and I used some early 2K primers that we'd wish we could just go back to lacquer primer because they were terrible as well.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, Stefano, is that the knowledge builds on knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And that your foundation as a tech has informed you in the industry. John, do you feel like that's the case, that your foundation as a tech, how does that feed into what you've done with the rest of your career?
100% it feeds in. You understand the industry, at least the production level of the industry, so much better. There's a whole pile of administrative that you'll never be prepared for coming off the bench. It's still a whole new world, and changing with different insurance companies, et cetera. But as far as how a shop runs, if you get good at learning how to fix cars and how they go through the shop, it's going to pay off in countless ways in overall operations.
So the basics 100%. Never leave you.
Basics never leave you.
Oliver, how do you feel about this?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Those values that you learn from being on the floor, when you step into the office and out front of the parking lot, and you're having those early discussions with the customer, when you can see what the repair is going to entail, you can give a really honest opinion of timeline for one. An untrained or an estimator without that on-floor experience that may have a script in their head that might kind of default to it'll be 2 or 3 days, whereas a technician that's an estimator that's looking at this car that, yeah, it appears to be somewhat superficial on the outside, but that experience is telling you there's some damage in behind. So you can create that expectation right away by saying it's going to be a week or so or a couple of weeks, and we're going to be up against ordering some parts, and we have to dismantle this car to identify those specific parts. And I believe the most effective estimators and shop managers were technicians or painters,
because you've got that foundation laid for the experience and to be able to make those informed decisions, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, Russell, sorry, I'm just so interested in what these guys have to say. I haven't gotten back to you in a bit, but you started off as a tech yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just, one other little segue back. I had an experience also with early cars. My father had a Land Rover dealership way back in the days. So this newfangled alloy that we're using on vehicles called aluminum, we were repairing that back in the late 60s and 70s, and didn't do a ton of repair. More a gash down the side of a Land Rover was a badge of honor, as opposed to something you wanted to repair. But that has been just a quantum benefit for me to understand the differences, with using mixed materials. The good parts and the bad parts. And, again, at ProSpot, we've just got solutions to deal with stuff like this. But as the rest of the panel have shared, past experiences have just been incredibly helpful in applying new technologies and learning new technologies.
Well, it sounds like you need to start with a passion. You need to start with the foundation, right? You guys all started with a bunch of gumption and got into this industry out of interest. And with it, you've gone some very different places. Now, I have a whole bunch of questions here, but I'm just most interested. We talked about how you started. Let's talk about where you ended up. And then we'll start to unravel how that process happened, because I hear from a lot of techs. They say, oh, I've been doing this for 2 or 3 years, and oh, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? And then I say, no, there's so much you can do in the collision repair industry. And you guys are all shining examples of the different directions that can take. Stefano, would you like to speak about what you're doing these days?
Sure thing. So as with many people, sometimes you look at what you're doing and you think, as you made the comment of, am I going to be doing this for the rest of my life? And some people are happy with that. And the world needs people, by all means, that are content doing whatever it is they're doing from beginning to their last days. That's awesome. Myself, I'm always constantly trying to, I guess, one up myself, try to get to a different position, different level, and understand everything that's going on around me. So we tend to have jaded ideas about certain aspects of our industry, and we can become pigeonholed in many ways. So I wanted to learn about what's it like to be on the other side. What's it like to be in management? What's it like to be an owner operator? What's it like to do the insurance side of things, and to get an understanding of everything, so that when you're looking at what you're doing, you have a full understanding as to why other things are taking place, whether you agree with them or not, but at least you know why they're doing what they do.
Okay, yeah, no, it's very interesting. There's so many moving parts, within the industry. It's sometimes hard to know what everyone's role is and how much goes into those functions. So where does that bring you today?
So today, I really focus a lot on hands-on development for people in welding. As Russ is well aware, I do a lot of different courses. I'm an ICAR instructor as well. And even with my own company, I will go out and do entry-level courses for technicians so that they can just upgrade their skills. And I've finally come to the point where I just want to see vehicles repaired correctly the first time and equitably for everyone involved. That is my main focus. Is that vehicle being repaired properly? Is it being calibrated? Is it being accounted for on the estimate? Are all of these steps in place? There's a lot of animosity amongst our industry in regards to how those things are conducted. And I like to try to put down the perspective of, looking at it from a customer's point of view, the customer being the vehicle owner, the one that signs the authorization to repair. Are they getting what they are expecting to get? And I'll try to do my best to help shops and staff members think the same idea, think about that ideology, about how putting this car back on the road to factory spec is our final outcome for that customer. And when I started this, my goal was to fix a car to make it look original again. That was my thing. And I think Oliver can attest to that. If he's doing restorations, there's a sense of gratitude and gratification in looking at that vehicle and making it look like it did the day it came off the assembly line. And if you can achieve that properly, safely, and equitably, then it's a great trade to be in.
Goodness. Yeah, it seems like you need the foundation of being a tech, or you've gotten a lot out of the foundation of being a tech, but it's a whole industry. And sometimes you need to look at it holistically, certainly. Oliver, where are you today? Where you're started on the shop and you've ended up where?
Well, I've kind of somewhat gone back to my roots. We touched on in the beginning, I worked my way up from an apprentice to a journeyman to a shop lead or a lead technician or shop foreman. And then I started just demonstrating these, I guess you would call them, management attributes. I had good organizational skills. I wanted to show more of a part in organizing the flow through the shop. And I just kind of gravitated towards this organizational behavior. And then it led into being asked to speak to a customer about something more technical than what the estimator or manager could convey to the customer. And it just led me into this management role. And I went down that path for just about, 4 or 5 years. And it came down to, I missed the roots. I missed getting my hands dirty. Like Stefano touched on, I missed that gratification of taking that, really smashed up nice car and making it look brand new again, to where the customer's thrilled with it, or taking that old car and repairing the rust and, rejuvenating the paint and once again making the owner of that car just thrilled that it made his dreams come true. And so I've gone out on my own and I'm doing restorations and getting my hands dirty every day. I'm working on my own. I don't have a crew. And yeah, so ultimately gone full circle and back to the roots.
That's great. Wow. John, what about you? Where are you today from your tech beginnings?
Working for a company called Lift Auto Group, 30 locations. And in the company, I take care of all the apprentice training, all the technician training, all our OEM certifications, all our equipment, et cetera. So basically focusing on how the vehicle is repaired is what my role is with the company.
How did you get into that? What kind of path did you take to get up there?
So I once again 15 years as a tech, and then I got into the college, and that's where I learned curriculum development and about all the apprenticeship program, et cetera. And then went to work doing equipment and trade, very similar kind of what Stefano's doing, but a little different, obviously. But out there and day to day in everybody's shops, and then ended up working with this crew, and it's been great. We've rapid expansion, so it's a new day every day.
Goodness. Now, Russell, can you talk a little bit about your experience and where you've ended up in this, and we tie this all together?
Yeah, so for me, James, I was very fortunate in my early career to actually have some mentors that helped direct me. And today I'm ending up in a sales and marketing role. But my real objective, as mentioned with both Stefano, John, and Oliver, is to be able to get cars back on the road that, and the term I use is crash ready. So they came in with all the safety precautions and, protecting occupants. And when they leave our shops today, I just feel our role is to get the right equipment, the right procedures into shop hands, train them how to use it. So when that car physically leaves, it is as ready to have a crash as when it came into the shop. And not just the cosmetics ends of it, we are structurally repairing that vehicle again.
Crash ready, that's a good term. Yeah. Now, you spoke on the importance of mentorship. How important would the rest of you say that mentorship has been through the development of your careers, trying to get you from being a tech to being where you are today? Oliver, you look like you've got thoughts.
It's crucial, and it kind of leads in, and maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, to our tech shortage situation that we have now. And
oh, please do.
I think some of what's missing is that passion that we spoke about, and we're definitely missing some mentorship. In my early days, the first collision shop I worked at, it was a shop full of journeymen, lots of experience, highly skilled people, and over the course of my career, I watched that dwindle down to where you might have, out of a shop of 6 technicians on the floor, you might have 2 really strong technicians, some young journeymen, and some apprentices. And I hear of shops, and I've been in shops where there's 1 journeyman, and some unlicensed people, and some very junior basic apprentices. And I just don't see how you can have that mentorship in that shop when you have a shop full of green people. It's something that, good technicians have always been hard to find, and today we're in a dire situation. I don't know that we're building that passion with our youth anymore. I don't think there's as many young kids reading magazines and dreaming about building their own hot rods. We've been focusing on building trades for years, i.e. framers and plumbers and electricians. And there's been that recognition of a skilled trade shortage. And there's been a lot of marketing to get, young kids into building houses. But it seems like the automotive trade, and specifically the auto body trade, is being left out of this. And we're in a really dire situation.
John, how do you feel about the tech shortage?
Oliver said it great. Like we're in dire straits. We need technicians, and it goes from everything. Like when you were talking about how we got into this, my high school had a body shop. We had a booth, and the instructor knew a little bit, but enough to get my interest in it. And he brought in people from the college in to meet the students, and that's how I ended up going. Like, but no high schools have, especially in urban locations, have shops anymore, so you're not getting exposed to it. And the cost of real estate, no one's wrenching in their garages anymore. And so that direct feed is pretty much gone. And then I think we do a poor job of marketing how technical the trade is now. It's kind of in the past been known as a dirtier trade, but the way things are going now, like we're basically fixing rolling laptops that go down the street now, and it's pretty fun.
Stefano, what do you have to add?
Are you sure you want to ask me about the education thing? 'Cause I
I'm
can go on a rant.
I'm absolutely sure. Yes, with blood curdling certainty.
So, encouraging them to the trade is a challenge, but I don't think that's really the issue. It's accommodating them when they want to get this learning process. We don't have it anymore. There is a shortage. Our education system, honestly, is a disaster when it comes to CTS, which is our career and technology studies. It's abysmal, in all honesty. There's a lot of factors, and what happens is bureaucracy destroys innovation. They're all about the dollar, and it's not about the student anymore, and it's a real sad state of affairs. I taught for 6 years in the high school, and when you start getting kids in there that you give the opportunity to do these things, they will gladly take on the challenge. And in our class, we managed to put cars and car shows. We rebuilt wrecked vehicles. We did customer work. Like, we ran it like a body shop, like a true collision center. And the kids it was a challenge because they would only get an hour 2 or 3 times a week to work on something. And it's hard to keep their engagement because there's so much other fluff that has been put into place. Like in my day, we had a lot more time in our labs when we were doing carpentry or metal work or construction or automotives. And I spent a great deal of my high school days in those labs. Today, they don't get the time. A lot of the times our labs get blown off because I got to study for a science thing, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. So with the enrollment dropping in those, what we call option courses, the perspective is from the admin staff, they look at it and go, wow, well, it costs a lot of money to run the auto body program, or costs a lot of money to run construction. And they don't see the value in it because it's hard work for them to get value out of it. It's really easy because with math, science, social, and English, kids have to be there. They get funding from the government, and it's easy peasy. The kids are obligated, and you got to buy some textbooks. Funding for our programs is not so easy because kids don't have to be there. It's a choice, and it's a lot of money. So if we can guide them to the other stuff, which is easy money, then why not do that? And then the labs become a storage unit versus a classroom, and eventually they disappear. And I think John mentioned it earlier. They're not going to build a school with an auto body lab in it. It's just not going to happen. Sadly, in many cases, I shouldn't make a blanket statement. That's not really right, but in most cases, that's it. And you'll find admin, like your principals, your vice principals, your the board, they don't see the value in us. They see the value in math, science, and getting the kid to go to university. That is their focus. And you ask any teacher in any district, that is what they'll tell you, that the focus is get that kid into the U of A or the U of T. Centennial College, what's that? What is NATE? What is SATE? The dumb kids go there. That's the mentality. And that's what you're up against, guys. That's why you're not seeing kids, because they don't have the opportunity to try it out when they're in school.
Well, you need most of the people I know who are in the auto body trade have a certain spark of innovation. They're able to see through this misconception that only dumb kids go there, this nonsense label that doesn't mean anything, in order to forge a path in something that they love. I'm sorry that it has to be so much darned hard work just to see through to what you want to do, right? See through the path to where you want to be in collision repair, and it shouldn't be. We should all be making this a lot easier on kids that could be incredibly interested and could thrive in this industry. And I think each of you is a testament to how far you can go with that passion. But we know about the necessity for continued tech training, but how do we make a new culture where people recognize the industry, the value in the industry, and the possibilities in the industry? Big questions today, gosh, but does anybody have any ideas? Russell, I think you are an idea man. I think you have big ideas about this.
Well, John used a comment about, rolling computers. So all of a sudden, the tech skill as well. I mean, there could be a complete electronics skill required in the now and in the future, just to be part of the repair process. Even down to our equipment. I mean, this stuff. We have Wi-Fi enabled welders, or we can upload information to, download information, update, welding curves. And it's absolutely amazing when we get a young tech that comes on board. And I'm tasked, thankfully, with some of the training aspect and how to operate these tools. And many of the young technicians I work with are able to just come up to the screens and start navigating.
Because they understand the screens.
They understand the screens, and then really start to embrace the equipment as just being more than a welder. I mean, this is an instrument to repair. And I really feel as the sophistication continues to rise, so will the acceptance of the skill set rise with it. It's a more marketable piece. We're not just running around in, dust and sanding materials and paint fumes. There is a whole, separate set of electronics, engineering going to be required at the repair level.
So what you're saying is the sophistication is already there.
The sophistication is there, and we just need to sell that sophistication now back to the schools and back to the industry in general. That there are careers that are going to go. There's careers within the career. You can start in one end and end up in another, or you could come in strictly at an electronics level, or at a programming level, calibration level, and maybe work your way to the body shop or paint side. So we now have career streams within a career, and this is what we need to market.
Oliver, how do you feel about this? How can we shift the culture?
Yeah, I mean, Russell did a great job of describing that. The days of banging out a dent and applying body filler and sending it to the paint shop, there's still an aspect of that for sure. I would say in a busy, well-equipped shop, the technical aspect is probably shared 50-50 with conventional body shop techniques to figuring out why a trouble code won't go away after a reassembly, or especially when that code is very specific to something that may have happened during the accident. Figuring out, if you have an OEM repair procedure that may require different programming to that welder, figuring out how to do that. It's something that's out of the comfort zone for some of our veteran techs. And like Russell said, the younger guys are right in there like, oh, I've seen that menu before. You go here, you double click on this, and there's something that we can attract the young techie computer orientated students that want to get into applying that skill and not getting a job as a computer programmer or an IT guy.
So you think the industry is 50-50, the 50% like old style repairs and 50% computers and calibration and 3D measuring? And
yeah, I would say so. John, would you agree with that?
I would 100%, or 60-40 at worst. Like, yes, the core competence of our business is, making vehicles right and painting them, but everything that comes with it, like we were talking about technologies that change, like now you have to figure out if the car's got to go for a calibration in the estimating process, because you can add 2 days to your delivery date just because you made a mistake, thinking, okay, well, it's good. Well, there's a code when you do it, and you got to go get it calibrated. Well, dealerships are just as busy as body shops right now. So unless you have a good relationship, you're not getting it in there. And yeah, it's very difficult. And to lead into your question about what else we can do, like the government wages, the way they describe our trade, and not just collision, all automotive, all transportation trades, they're out to lunch with what they think our salaries are. Like I'm on the government website right now, I pulled it up. For across Canada, the average technician salary is $50,000 to $59,000 a year. That's not true. But they also have mechanics, automotive technicians, truck technicians, all the way, same thing. Everything, not just collision, mechanical, heavy duty, they've got us between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. And that is way out to lunch. And of course, you're not going to attract people when you're seeing plumbers starting at, they're making $46, $48 an hour, right? So the conception of return on investment is wrong in this trade as well.
So you feel like there's a problem in how the government perceives the industry. And it sounds like there's a problem in how the public perceives the industry too. If 50% of the shop is now living in the future, so to speak, then why is the public perception trapped back in the 1940s where everyone has, I'm just thinking of the Billy Joel music video for Uptown Girl where everybody's in overalls there's a disconnect, right? There's a huge disconnect here between.
There's a huge disconnect, and all the way to the colleges, all the way through, because you're based. See, with being in most shops in collision, they're still flat rate environments, and anything that's above and beyond is considered overtime. So the government will never adjust those wages. So they just literally take our hourly rate, which is in our trade we call it the multiplier, because you're more worried about hours produced as opposed to hourly rate.
So complete misunderstanding.
Completely misunderstanding, and maybe we did it to ourselves with the way we pay. But that was well before my time in this industry. I did not set up the pay plan.
Now, Oliver, it sounds like I'll pick on you a little bit because it sounds like there's a lot to know, right? And I don't want people listening and maybe they're thinking of getting into the trade. I don't want them thinking that they have to learn a whole language or something. But how do we maintain a level of professionalism and training? How do you maintain all this knowledge and upkeep all this knowledge?
Well, I think right from the beginning, I think the conception is you're going to do your stint at trade school and complete your apprenticeship, and that's going to arm you with all the knowledge you're going to need for the entirety of your career. And we need to change that mindset. And technicians today, they're apprentices from the day they start their apprenticeship until the day they retire from the industry. And I think our vocational instructors need to instill that thought process, that you're going to learn something every day. And I think our shop owners and our shop managers need to instill this mindset as well, that and as owners and managers, they should be learning every day as new technologies present themselves in the industry. And I think there needs to be a focus that, what are we going to learn today? What's coming out today? What is the new article going to present us that we need to learn today? What new models are coming out next year? And how is the construction different? And we need to strive to learn new things and stay current with technologies. And the old mindset is that we are a journeyman, we know everything, needs to change.
So people getting into the industry should know that there's always going to be something new to learn. Is that 100%. Fair? That's a fair 100%. Statement.
The goalposts are constantly moving. Every time a new model comes out, a new way of repairing something comes out, you have to adapt with it. I think the best technicians are curious technicians. They want to know what's next. And I think the ones that excel usually are the ones that are reading on their own time and looking at procedures and confirming that their thoughts are true. You used to have a little bit more creative license in how the vehicle was repaired. Now you're expected to follow a standard and the way it should be.
Now we speak of customer satisfaction and to survive the next crash. How does that affect shop operations? Specifically, let's talk about, does the poor workman blame his tools, or are the right tools the key to succeeding these days in collision repair? What about you, Stefano?
Sure. So I was going to say to your other points too, as well, with the training and continuing the training, Russ made a very good point that the more the technology supersedes, the more that the training is going to be relevant and people are going to be engaged in it. Obviously, a doctor doesn't do a hip replacement the same way they did 10 years ago, or a knee replacement. Things are much different. They upgrade. For us, for a shop, I think to maintain that level of professionalism, a shop needs to mandate it. In all honesty, I'm sure, John, with the group that you're with and the shops you deal with, you can't afford to have a technician that says, I'm not going to do that course. I'm not going to go do this. Like, that's not part of the equation. If you need to meet a level of expertise, that level needs to be second to none for your facility to run, function, and operate properly, right? Maybe you make it clear that if you don't go to the training, then you don't get to come to work, period. So when we look at things like customer satisfaction and surviving the next crash and that mentality, there's a lot of things to unpack with that. First, the term customer satisfaction has been exploited and skewed to such a level now that the perception is it's just incredible how much focus is put on that. Now, I get it. Customer wants to be happy, but everywhere I turn, it's all about the CSI score. Like, that's the big thing now. And it ties to turnaround time, which in related to that, it's no longer customer service, it's customer processing. And when you start to put that into our industry, you're starting to chip away at the things that make the industry great. If it's all about KPIs and getting that car out the door ASAP as fast as I can, something's going to give. And eventually it's going to be the quality of the work or the engagement from the technician. They're no longer looked upon as a technician. They're looked upon as a, just a processor, which is really disappointing.
So you think the customer can get lost in those data?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. People think the payee is the customer. Well, they're not. The customer is the person that signs the authorization. It's the person that owns the car. The technician is the repairer. They're the one with the skill set. They're the one that is going to do that. So having the right equipment, having the right training and the right tools in place for that tech to perform their job properly, and for that shop to get that car to that next level is paramount. Whether or not there's, the reality has to be expressed that if it takes X amount of days to do the job, that's what it takes. John alluded to the point where, at the estimating level, you need to be aware of things like your codes, that you're doing your post scans and pre scans, and that you need to be able to factor that into your timeline. And being pressured by these KPIs it turns around to become detrimental in some ways, because people get fixated on the wrong thing, right? So I think shops need to back up from being so fixated on corporate ideologies and focus more on what they're truly there to do, and that is to repair vehicles properly and to do it well with pride. When you're scrutinized to that degree, your pride starts to disappear. And if you have no pride in what you're doing, and I'm sure, Oliver, you can attest to this, if you weren't proud of the work you did, people aren't going to come to you for restos, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So seems like there's a big juggling, a balancing act between making sure your training is up and your pride is up. And let's talk a little bit about tools, because we could be here all day. Really, we could be here all day. This is a great discussion, and I thank you guys so much for coming on today. But in terms of attracting people into the industry, equipment is new. There's all kinds of new equipment every year. Crazy, interesting, advanced technology coming out. How important is the right equipment for the job? Russell, can you speak to that a little?
Well, for us, we will see technicians attracted to a shop by the equipment that they have. They've maybe been exposed to it in previous conditions, and will make a decision on a shop to join based on the level of equipment that they have, which gives them the ability to work, on sophisticated vehicles or more sophisticated vehicles. So a very important attraction tool for the shop, but also is going to allow shops to truly repair to the OEE specifications by having the right equipment. It doesn't mean that you can't patch something together, but again, it will still come back down to the right repair not necessarily being done. So equipment in a shop today is going to play a vital role in not only allowing you to repair equipment, but also to attract good technicians.
Well, as a new tech, I think the shop culture you're getting into is vitally important. Most shops that I go to, as their point of pride, they say, "Oh, look at our fancy new," and then they show me this and this equipment, because it's fun, they're toys, but they're made to they're tools. They're made to perform.
Let me just finish on that, and we've seen that as well. And sometimes, as an industry, we call them box checkers. I mean, they are a showcase. They are the piece at the front. Look what we have. But without the, Stefanos of the world, showing that these things work and are used, not only just to meet this criteria, but, use these tools properly. And these are increased efficiencies at shops, increased efficiencies for technicians, And in a nutshell, increased efficiency results in increased profits and turn through time or cycle times. So it's not just enough to have the equipment. It's absolutely paramount that we as manufacturers, industry engagers like Stefano, training, and even Oliver at the other end of the career right now, being able to recognize what equipment he has or doesn't have at any given time, or how he gets access to it. And then John running at 30 plus stores. How do I keep all of that equipment current and people trained? I mean, it's a monumentous task, but one that just can't be, that we can't take our foot off the accelerator here. This is the route forward.
And certification is a big part of that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. John, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's been a big push. Every single one of our locations has at least 6 certifications, or in the process of getting them. And yeah, it is very difficult to see what is, everybody's got different standards of training and equipment. So to play that game where all of our 30 locations are compliant is very difficult, very time consuming. We try and standardize everything. We try and, as best as we can without costing too much money, but we'll go and we'll try and run the same type of welders throughout all our locations, same frame equipment or multiples, just so with us with moving, we think of it a little different. We got a lot more pieces to move around. We may have a tech that has to fill in over here, a manager has to fill in there. So standardization for us with equipment is very important as well.
Well, the lines, it seems, of being professional have never been clearer in the collision repair industry. And you meet those lines, or you don't meet those lines. But there's a lot to be done. Gosh, you guys make the collision repair industry sound so exciting, so vibrant and living. And certainly it is. We're going to cut short our questions a little bit because we're running out of time. But as a last thing, I want to hear from each of you. What advice do you have to new techs who want to start out in collision repair, or maybe thinking about starting out in collision repair? Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, I saw this question earlier and I gave it a lot of thought. I probably spent most of my time. It's probably the shortest answer, but I probably spent most of my time thinking of this. And I came up with just some bullet points. For one, work hard. And that's the key to any trade, I think. Work hard through your apprenticeship. Strive to learn something every day. And ask lots of questions. Years ago, I was somebody that I hold in high regard said to me, smart people ask questions, and it always resonated with me. Take pride in your work, and strive to advance your skills, and don't become complacent in your trade. And that would be my advice, short answer to a new technician.
What about you, Stefano?
To echo a lot of what Oliver said, but pride, have and take pride in what you do. If you don't, nothing else is going to matter. Without that, it becomes mute. So stand your ground, learn as much as possible, apply it, and don't waffle on it. Don't succumb to pressures from above that say you don't have to do this, don't have to do that. Take pride in what you do. It's tough. It's not easy. And sometimes the rewards for monetarily may not be everything you're expecting, but you will sleep at night. And for me, a good night's sleep is paramount. I like to sleep at night. So I've met a few techs that have this mentality. And if I was a shop, I'd hire them in a heartbeat. And it shows in their work, and it shows for the shop when their work leaves and it doesn't come back. And I'm sure John can attest to that. If you've got 30 facilities, you want that tech that is super proud of what they do. And if they keep that mentality and keep that motivation going, they'll be respected and they'll never be without work.
Pride in your work seems scarce these days. And it's a blessing if you have an industry that you can take pride in what you do, certainly. John, what advice would you give to a new tech?
Very similar to Stefano. I used to teach high school ACET program when we would have to get young guys out into the trade, and I'd started the basics with them. I always say, always be on time when you're new. If you're trying to get there, timeliness is important. I always say, remember your ABCs, always be cleaning. If you got a minute to if you got a minute and they're not telling you to do something, start cleaning. And then lastly, it's kind of my personal motto: we hire for attitude, trade for aptitude. Find out if they can work, and if they can work, let's figure out what they can do, because that's the hardest skill gap right now is people who want to work. Like this is at the end of the day, as much as it's changing to a technology based trade, there's still work involved. It's a physical, demanding job, and so you be prepared for that.
Okay, Russell, I'll give you the last word. What do you want to say to text today?
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, and again, thank you, panel, for all of your valued comments. But it's a trade that we never stop learning in, and you may come home, as John says, physically tired. From my role now, many hours of driving, flying. I am constantly learning new things, even at this vintage. And a lot of my learning comes from the group like we have today that share things that they see in industry, good, bad, or indifferent. And my job doesn't shut at 5 o'clock. I use that time in the evenings if I have downtime, just to read on a new process or to see where processes have gone. Art sent us a wonderful little note through this, in that a Chevy Bolt has 10 million line codes of information in it today. Our latest Dreamliner at 787 only has 6.5 million lines of code. So, I mean, you can't stop learning. So if you have a passion for learning, and this career is never going to become stagnant. It is a vibrant career path, and it is one of continued learning.
Passion for learning, continued learning. Those are good notes to end on. Thank you, everyone, for being with me today. That was Russ Duncan from ProSpot International. I have John Martinelich from Lift Auto Group. Thank you to Stefano Liesi from the Canadian Collision Specialist, and Oliver Teal from Relic Custom Garage. We were talking today about how three panelists started off as techs, ended up in crazy, interesting places, and how do we conclude? It was because of continued learning, and it was because of a constantly changing industry. It was because of good foundations and taking pride in your work. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today for Industry Insider. I'm James Kerr, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening: Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or YouTube. And tune in next time for another episode of Industry Insider Radio. I'm James Kerr. Thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you by ProSpot International, maker of quality welding systems and repair products for the collision repair industry. For more information on ProSpot, please visit their website at prospot.com, prospot.com, or email info@prospot.com.